All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah Daf Dalid. We left off on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. We learned a very important Beitzah that we will quickly recap on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. The Beitzah first reiterated the din that we learned in the Mishnah, the first din in the Mishnah, Keshitas Beis Hillel L'chumra, that the Beitzah says that a Beitzah that's noel b'Shabbos, or whether it was laid on Yom Tiv, you're not allowed to handle it, you're not allowed to be metaltal it, etc. Then the Beitzah said, rule number 2, usfeika asura. And the Havamina was, usfeika means that if there is a doubt whether the egg was laid on Shabbos or on Yom Tiv, and then the Beitzah gave halacha number 3, clause number 3, that if this egg got mixed up with even another 1,000 eggs, they are all prohibited. And as the Gemara pointed out, that there appears to be some sort of inherent contradiction. In other words, if the case number 3, which is l'chora, continuation from case number 2, if we are speaking about an egg that was born on Yom Tiv, or there is a doubt whether it was born on Yom Tiv, so we went back to the 4 interpretations we had in the Mishnah. Bishleim, according to Rabbah, Hachana the Rabbah, who explained Shitas Beis Hillel based on a doiraisa, Sofik doiraisa l'chumra. What the Gemara doesn't verbalize, but the Rishonim do, even if you're going to follow the first approach of Rav Nachman on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, that it has to do with what? With Muksa. Even though Muksa is a Derabanan, but it's considered a very stringent Derabanan, let's call this a quasi doiraisa, Sveika, we can understand that it's going to be L'chumra. But according to Rabbi Yosef, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, it's a typical Gezerah, Sofik Derabanan should be L'kula. So for that, the Gemara responded, Enachanami, that when the Beitzah says Sveika Asura, it's not you have a doubt whether the egg was laid on Yom Tov or on a weekday. Sveika refers that there's a doubt whether this egg came from a mother, came from a hen, that is a treifa. And the rule is that anything that comes that is omitted from a treifa is accordingly a treifa. You have a doubt whether it came from a treifa. That's called a Sofik doiraisa. And that's why the Beitzah said Sveika Asura. The problem is, what's about case number 3? In other words, if we're speaking about an egg that's laid on Yom Tov, since the only prohibition is on Boi Bayom, that's called a davar. That's an item that will become permitted. Something that becomes permitted, davar sheyesh lematidin, is not nullified, because wait until the next day, wait until it will become permitted. But now that you establish that we're speaking about a Sofik treifa, that never will become permitted, so why is it not nullified? So the Gemara's answer is because an egg, which is at least typically sold by a unit, that was the whole sugya of kol shadarka limonos. Es shadarka limonos is considered halachically a significant item, a davar chashuv, and a davar chashuv is also not subject to the laws of nullification. Afilu be'elaf loy batel. The Gemara was going back and forth that not everyone holds that an egg has that level of chashivus, because if we're going to follow the version b'shitas Rav Meir that only es shedarkei limonos, only something that is exclusively only sold by unit is something that's considered chashuv and not nullified. Eggs are not only exclusively sold by unit. There are times that people sell them by bulk, by approximation. That's where we left off. So the Gemara said, true, that even the ones who are goyres, b'shitas Rabbi Meir, es shedarkei limonos, Rabbi Meir is not the only Tana that opines on this topic, and that's where we left off on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. We're going to quote a Mishnah that speaks about litra kitziyos. We'll speak about it again, the kitzid, and we will find that there are actually various versions as to what is the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. But according to Rabbi Yehuda's version, according to Rabbi Yoshua, we will find that if there's an item that is even only sometimes sold by unit, it indeed is considered already chashuv, and it will not be nullified. And that will explain the Beitzah. And on Daf Daled Amud Beis, we're going to go back and we're going to explain another understanding of usfeika asura. It's going to lead us into a recap of the rule of the principle known as breira, retroactive clarification, as we will apply this to our din of an egg that was laid on Yom Tiv. And ultimately, what we will begin, at least on Daf Daled, and this mamish will continue until the end of Daf Hey, is Rav opined 3 times regarding a case that is similar one to the other. One will be what happens if Shabbos and Yom Tov fall consecutively one after the other. Makes no difference whether Shabbos is day number 1, Yom Tov is day number 2, or the opposite. What happens if an egg is laid on the first of these 2 holy days? We know, we paskin like Beis Hillel. What's going to be the law regarding the egg on the second day? If it was laid, let's say Yom Tov, let's say a Sunday, if an egg was laid on Shabbos, okay, you can't handle it. It's asur b'tiltul, asur to eat it. What will be the status of the egg on the next day? That is case number 1 in which Rav opined. We'll see what he says.
What'd you say?
The next topic will be on a 2-day Yom Tov. We keep, all right, and that will be the whole topic regarding why do we keep 2 days Yom Tov? What's going to be regarding an egg that's born on one day? Will it be permitted or not on the second day? And Rav gave an opinion. And then the 3rd one, will be regarding the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And we will see how the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not to be viewed like a typical 2 days Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. And Daf Daled, Amud Beis, this is a very important daf, aside of many details about the rules of nullification, like Ein Mevatlin, Isser Lechatchila, etc. We will properly understand the origin and how are we to view the 2 days of Golus, when was it established in Chutz La'aretz, and a lot more. And without any further ado, Chavra Nachamal Daf Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, the Tanan, what we are looking here is to find a Tana who holds that if something is even only sometimes sold by individual unit, that renders this item chashuv, that renders this item significant, and thus we apply the rule that it's not going to be nullified. Afilu be'eluf leibat. This is the case of the Mishnah. Litra ketzios. We're speaking here about pressed figs. Now let's just make it clear. We're going to learn the Gemara according to the vast majority opinions of the Rishonim that figs only have to be tithed midrabanan. We're speaking about truma figs, so it's a rabbinic truma, but nevertheless it's truma. Now truma can only be eaten by a kohen. If truma gets mixed with other food items, obviously, if it's discernible, if you can recognize it, take it out. But if there is a demuah, there's a mixture, so b'chlal truma does become nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1. And if you don't have that ratio, then you have to treat all of that produce, all of those fruits, as if it is truma. And there's a lot of consequences. Not that you have to give it all to a kohen, but that only a kohen can eat any of it, which substantially diminishes the value of this mixture. Now, they would have these molds, these round molds, into which they would press these dried figs, and it would become like a cake, and they would take it to the marketplace, and people would buy a certain slice of it. And what happened here is you had litra is a quantity. We're going to follow Shitas Rashi that it is the quantity of a loig of ketzios, of dried pressed figs. Shederasa al pi igol, it was pressed into this round mold. And you know that in other words, one of the molds, the top of the mold, has truma. But ve'eino yoidea ve'eze igol derasa. You have many molds in front of you, and you don't know into which one of the molds did you press in these ktzios of truma. Or 2 other cases that are very similar, or if you pressed it into some sort of barrel, but it's on the mouth of the barrel, that's important, and there are many barrels in front of you. Or the 3rd case, the last line in the Amid, al pi kaveres, you have some sort of basket, and again, you pressed it into the mouth of the basket. So there is a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, but there is a machlokes Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. What did those 2 Tanoim say? So Rav Meir, the version of Rav Meir is, Rav Meir's version of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is, Rabbi Eliezer Oimer Daf Dalid, that we are allowed to be extremely lenient. Royen esho el yoinois ki ilu hein penudois. We look at the top of, let's go to the first case, to the top of this eagle, of this round mold. See, let me explain like this. If you were to have 101 of these molds, and in one of them you press the truma, then b'chlal it's a non-issue, since you don't remember in which one it is. So therefore it's nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1. Eloma, the problem here is that you don't have 101 of these round molds or barrels or baskets. However, says, according to Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Eliezer, we are allowed to make believe, to view every mold, not that since I know that the truma was pressed in the mouth on the top of the molds, I'm only focusing on the top. No, let's say if one mold has the quantity of 20 liters, 20. So we can count, we can say that 20, the mold, the truma was pressed into the top. Well, the top is 1. There's another 19 here. Let's look at the other molds. If you are allowed, and he says you are allowed to make believe, to imagine as if every mold has different liters that are separated one from the other. So now you see many, many more liters. You're not only focusing on the mouth of a mold, even though you know it's only in the mouth. You get to look at how many liters do you have in every barrel, in every mold, in every basket. And if sum total you have 100 versus 1, so there's the ratio of 101 that's going to be nullified. So you allow that the hatachtoinois, all of the lower parts of all of the molds, yes, malois, esol, they will be able to nullify the upper ones. Obviously, you do have to have the ratio total of 100 against the 1, but now you are allowed to make a lot more use of every one of these baskets, of these molds, and of these barrels. It's clear. Clear, yeah? In other words, if I have something on top of this cup, if I can only view the top of the cup, then I need to have another 100 of cups. But if I say, there's an inch of every cup, but every cup is 10 inches, then I have 10 in each cup, then every cup counts for much more. However, Yeshua is more machmir, and he says no, that you're not allowed to, so to say, separate the litras of every mold. You could only focus on the mouths. Im yesha meyapumin, if you have 100 mouths, whether it is from the mold, whether it is from the barrel, whether it is from the basket, so then yes, now you have the ratio of 100 to 1, yalu. But the imla, but if not, hapumin asurin, v'hashulayim mutarim, it won't be nullified. But there's an upside. Even though it's not nullified, the doubt is only concerning the top, the mouth, the openings of these molds. So you have to treat all of them. Maybe it's truma, but the shulayim, which means the bottom parts, which is the 99% of these molds, anything beneath the mouth, for sure there is no truma in any of them, so all of them can be consumed as chulin is. Now that is version number 1. I just explained why is Rabbi Eliezer so lenient. So Rashi says, Taka, since truma of peiros is only midrabanan, indeed we get to be extremely lenient. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he has a different version of the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. What's his version? Also that Rabbi Eliezer is more lenient. Rabbi Yeshua is more strict. But each one is going a little bit more chamur than the tradition of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im yesha meya pumin yalu, that you have to have the ratio of 101. No one says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you get to, so to say, imagine as if the figs in each one of these molds are separated one from the other. You only look at the top, at the mouths, and you have to have 100 to 1. And then yalo, then it will become nullified. We take one out, we give one to the kohen, and everything else is good. But if not, according to Rabbi Yehuda's version, Rabbi Eliezer says exactly that which Rabbi Yeshua says, according to Rabbi Meir's version. Now, Rabbi Yeshua Omer, even if you have 300 molds, it's just a number. Obviously, there's a reason for the 300, but even if you have the 101 ratio, lo yalu, these figs will never become nullified. And you know why? Because many times, it doesn't even have to be most of the times, These pressed figs are sold by unit. We're speaking about a unit of a litra. And therefore, it's considered something that's chashuv. And even though it's only truma midrabanan, doesn't matter. The dinim of nullification don't apply to that which is halachically considered significant. So this is going to be the shita, as the Gemara explains, that even though sfeika of the Beitzah on Daf Gimel Amud Beis is about sfeika, a suffix of treifa, it's a davar she'ein loy matirin. Why is it be'elef won't be batal? Because eggs are sold many times by unit, which makes eggs chashuv. So therefore, it's not nullified. Oh, now let's continue to learn another Beitzah. Says the Beitzah, the rasa be'igol, it sounds to be the same case, like the Mishnah we just quoted, that if you have again these pressed figs, and you press them into the mold, you don't know into which mold you pressed it, everyone agrees that you will be able to nullify it. The Gemara interrupts and the Gemara asks, what are you talking about? This is the machloikas that we had above. We just quoted Rabbi Yehuda's version of Rabbi Yeshua. B'chlal, pressed figs are never nullified. So Amar Rav Papa Hachi Ka'amar, that drasa be'igol, the case of the Beitzah is that if you press these figs into the mold, and you don't know into what part of the mold you pressed it. Not like the case of the Mishnah, that you know it was pressed on the top, on the mouth. You pressed it somewhere. You don't know whether it was to the north, whether it is to the south. That's these directions are typically used, even though we're speaking about inside a keli. Says the Beitzah here, since you don't know in which part, divrei hakol yalo, in this case, everyone will say what Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Eliezer says, that that is going to become nullified. Now let me explain something over here. That here, the liter of truma is not a recognizable unit. You see, if you know that you pressed it to the top of the mouth, the top is a recognizable unit. Even though we just said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yeshua, if something is only sometimes sold by unit, it's not nullified, shkoyach. That's if it is a recognizable unit. If it's b'chlal not a recognizable unit, there's some figs pressed somewhere in the barrel. So right now, for sure, divrei hakol, it's going to become nullified. Unlike, just in contrast, an egg. You know that there is an egg that might have come from a treifa, and this egg gets mixed up with a whole box of eggs. Every egg is recognizable. Every egg is recognizable. And that's why the Beitzah says that it's never going to be nullified. Okay. Now, 13 lines from the top of the Amid, going back to the Beitzah and Daf Gimel Amid Beis. Rav Ashi Omar, that the way we learned Pshat in the beginning will stand. The Beitzah introduces the law of an egg that's laid on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, Muktzah. The next case of the Beitzah, Sfeika, is speaking about, you have a doubt whether it was laid on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. And now, if it's speaking about a doubt whether it was laid on Shabbos or not, or on a weekday, that explains the third clause. That's why it's not going to be nullified, because of the rule that any davar sheyesh lematirin is not batal. The question we had was according to Rav Yosef and according to Rav Yitzchak, going back to the beginning of the Masechta, that they understand that the problem with an egg that's laid on Shabbos or Yom Tov is a isur d'Rabbanan. So what was our kasha? Safek d'Rabbanan lohakil. Now Rav Ashi answers that. But since it is a davar sheyesh lematirin, because the din of the egg that's laid on Yom Tov is only muktzah on Yom Tov, or only asir gezeira on Yom Tov. V'chol davar sheyesh lematirin, as we learned above, and here Rav Ashi adds a nuance, even if the isur is only midrabanan, nevertheless it is not nullified. So now continues Rashi to explain that just like when it comes to the laws of bittul, we're a machmer based on the logic, it's anyways going to become permissible. In our case, the next day. So it's not going to be nullified, says Rashi. Similarly, we're going to be machmer by saying that suffix is going to be also Gavaldik. No, suffix that Rabbanan lekula is because we're dealing with a rabbinic law. upon which we could be lenient. But the fact that this is a davar sheyesh lematirin, and therefore we are machmer, it's not batal. If we are machmer with it, then we will also be machmer with it safek. So yes, safek that abanan lekula, but there are exceptions. By a davar sheyesh lematirin, it's not going to become. It will never be subject. I'm saying it's not subject to bittul. And when there's a doubt, we will be machmer. Same logic. You have a doubt, don't eat it. Wait until tomorrow. Okay, Atka. Now, what did we do until now? We had really 4 reasons that explain the shita of Beis Shammai. I'm sorry, the shita of Beis Hillel in the Mishnah. Beis Hillel is machmer. Beis Hillel says you can't eat the egg. Really, you can't even handle the egg. Why? Okay, Rav Nachman, Rabba, Rav Yosef, Rav Yitzchak. Now we'll focus on Beis Shammai. Why is Beis Shammai lenient? Tanya, we learned in the Beitzah, Achedim Oimrim, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. And Chevra, let's remember that the Tana Rabbi Eliezer, he's known as Shamuti, which has 2 meanings. One of which is that he is a Talmud of Beis Shammai. Generally, he's aligned with the Shita of Beis Shammai. That Beitzah, Teyachel, he ve'imam. That an egg that's laid on Yom Tov, the egg and the mother is allowed to be eaten. Frek the Gemara, hold on, Mama's going back to the beginning, to the base. Ilema that acherim, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer is speaking about a tarnagoyles, ho'imedes la'achilom. If we're speaking about the hen that was prior to Yom Tov already designated to be consumed, Shita, the he, ve'ima, sharia, I don't need to have a acherim, I don't have to have a Rabbi Eliezer. Elot must be but tarnagoyles that was actually designated legadol beitzim. It was designated to lay eggs. Oy bazoi, he ve'ima should be asura. Now hold on. Let's go back to that base. No. Let's speak about you changed your mind. Rab Shimon has a very limited application of muksa. Who says that he subscribes to muksa? So you should know that Rabbi Eliezer, we know that Rabbi Eliezer follows Rabbi Yehuda's application of muksa. So now we got a problem. Because normally we say, Rabbi Eliezer follows Beis Shammai. No, but here, if we're going to say that we're speaking about a Tanach Beitzim, so Rabbi Eliezer, who subscribes to Rabbi Yehuda's broader application, he should subscribe to the fact that there is muksa. So clarifies Rab Zera that this Beitzah, Achedim Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, is speaking about a unique case where the Beitzah says, you want to know whether you can have the egg? It depends whether you're eating the mother. The egg can only be eaten if you're going to eat the mother. What do we mean by that? Why does the eating of the hen have to do with anything? So Heichi Damin, this is really clarifying what Rab Zera is saying. Amar Abaye, Kigoin Shalakocha Stam. You bought a hen. And when you bought a hen, it was not clear by you whether you bought it to eat it, whether you bought it for it to lay eggs. You leave it open. And now let's speak out by heart. We have this general Shas topic known as Breira, which is retroactive clarification. What were to happen if on Yom Tov you decide to eat the hen? When you determine on Yom Tov that you're eating the hen, retroactively we say you bought it to eat. Once we establish that you bought this hen to be eaten, then the egg, which is just food coming out of food, a part of the food, the egg will be permissible. That's the meaning of the Beitzah. So if you shech the hen on Yom Tov, is huvra de lachiloi medes, is the retroactively we say that the whole hen was bought to be eaten, and therefore chavra, the egg is also permitted. But loy nishchata, if you don't shecht it, that non-shechting it is enough. That huvra de legala beitzah medes. Well, you're not shechting a hen. You have it to raise that you should lay eggs. It's muksa and anachanami. And Rabbi Eliezer normally will follow the sheet of Beis Shammai, but don't forget that Rabbi Eliezer paskins like Rabbi Yehuda as far as muksa is concerned, and he indeed will hold that not only is the mother, but also the egg will have the status of muksa. Rav Mari Amar, another approach, right? that when the Beitzah says that he and the mother can be eaten, the chiddush of the Beitzah is primarily only about the egg. The fact that the Beitzah mentioned also the hen, guzma. Now the word guzma normally means an exaggeration. What he means over here is he wants, when someone wants to say the egg is so permissible, the egg is permissible, the mother is permissible, even though there's no novelty concerning the mother, as the Gemara clarifies. The Tanya, again, another Beitzah, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Beitzah, again, the egg here is an egg that's laid on Yom Tov, Teiachel, it can be eaten, the mother can be eaten. Then he says, and if you have a hatched shiklet and a froyach, now when did it hatch? We'll clarify that in a moment. The froyach, the chick can be eaten, and its shell can be eaten. Whoa, shell? My klipasi asks the Gemara. Ilem klipa mamish, klipa basachilahi. Forget about it. Before you get into what will be the issue, no one eats shells. Elot means l'choira efroyach beklipasai, that one may take a unhatched chick that you took out of the shell and eat it. L'choira, you can eat the chick that you removed from the shell. No way. My friends, this is not even a Yom Tov Shabbos issue. I want you to know that if there is a egg that the shell breaks, so the chicklet, so to say, is hatched. If it didn't yet open up its eyes, there's a machloikas tanoim whether you can machlal shecht it yet or not. Shchita resolves a living being, an independent living being, and we're going to learn about this in a few daf from now. So you can take a chick out of the shell? No way. At kanle pligi between Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the Chachamim, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the first wide line. Here also there's a machloikas tanoim whether you are allowed to shecht it before it opened his eyes. If you go into an egg, you take a chicklet out, everyone will agree that this may not be eaten. Okay, this is not Shabbos Yontif, this is during the week. Elot must mean that when this other new Beitzah, when we speak about that you can eat the egg with the mother, the efroyach with the klipa, efroyach v'klipasoi guzma. It's an exaggeration. You did not remove it from its shell. You just want to say that it's so kosher, you can have it, you can have the shell. Hachinami te'achel hi ve'ima. It's really a guzma. It's really a guzma. And let's go like this, that we're speaking about an egg that we're speaking about, the mother was designated to be eaten. The mother was then, so there's no chiddush at all that you can eat the mother. There is a chiddush, this paskin, like Beishamai, that you can eat the egg. Why would you think you can't eat the egg? Like we learned that Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yitzchak, one can think, maybe make a gzeira. People, this is like the fruit that fell off the tree. This is like juices that float automatically. But the focus is not about the mother. The ikir is only about the chicklet. Atkan. And now we are beginning, like we mentioned in the introduction, we're going to have Rav's Shita in 3 cases. Let's see how far we can get today. And whatever we can get today, we'll continue on Daf Hey. It's all going to be the same Nakuda. Now that we established the din of Beis Hillel, that if you have an egg that's laid either on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, that egg may not be eaten, really meaning it may not even be handled. What's going to happen if you have 2 days of Kedusha, one back to back with the other, 2 consecutive days of holiness? And the first case will be Shabbos and Yom Tov in either order. And guys, whenever you read about is the egg mutar or aser, we're not focusing on the day that it was laid. We already understood. We all know the shita of Beis Hillel. We paskin like Beis Hillel. Of course, the egg that's laid on Shabbos or on Yom Tov may not be eaten, may not be handled. Question here will be, if it's laid on Shabbos and Sunday is Yom Tov, can you have it on Sunday? Or if it was laid on Friday, Yom Tov, if Friday is Yom Tov, can you have it on Shabbos? So Itmar, Shabbos, Yom Tov, and they're consecutive, back to back with the other. Rav is Machmer. Rav Amar, Noel Dobazeh, Asur Bazeh. Who's the lenient opinion? Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, that Noel Dobazeh is Muteres Bezeh, Now, there's no need to explain the shita of Rabbi Yechanan, because, like we learned in the Mishnah, we learned the first Rashi in this Masechta, when the Mishnah said, Beitzah, loy seyachel, boy bayoim. Like, what would even be the issue? The question here is about eating it on the next day. What's the problem? So Rabbi Yechanan doesn't have to be explained. The Gemara has to explain Rav. So Nemo, are you telling me the logic will be that Rav holds that Shabbos and Yom Tov are considered Kedusha Achasi? They're considered like one extended period of holiness? Or in the words here of the Rishonim, is it viewed as a Yoima Aricha, which might be a way we'll look at the 2 days of Yom Tov, which will be the way we look at 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. But are you telling me that Shabbos and Yom Tov should be considered one day? So the egg that's laid on whichever one of these days is also on that day, but it becomes a 48-hour day? Absolutely not. What are we talking about? Chevra, we already mentioned this before, that an Eruv Techumen has to be placed if you want to go beyond the boundaries, but it's only valid for that holy day. And the 4 elders, Paskin, like the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, concerning Eruv Techumen. What happens if I want to go, let's say the case will be Shabbos and Yom Tov, like it says in the Itmer. Yom Tov is on Sunday. On Shabbos, I want to go to the town to the north to hear the drasha there. And on Shabbos, and on Yom Tov, I want to go to the town to the south. Can you do that? So the 4 elders quoted Rabbi Eliezer that says, yes, you could. You could put 1 Eruv Techumen for Shabbos and another for Yom Tov. You know why you can do that? Because it's not considered one day. If it would be considered one day, then you would only be allowed to place 1 Eruv Techumen for all of the 48 hours. But we pass like Rabbi Eliezer, and so says Rav himself. So it doesn't make sense. Why would Rav be machmer? Answers the Gemara, the second approach we had in understanding the sheet of Beis Hillel, upon which we paskin, based on whom we paskin that the egg may not be eaten on Shabbos, farvos, because if Shabbos falls out after Friday Yom Tov, when the egg is born on Shabbos, it means it was completely finalized, finished, prepared the day prior. Day prior is Yom Tov. We have this rule that any Yom Tov meichen lo Shabbos. How can you eat it if it was not prepared on an ordinary weekday? Or similarly, like we learned, that if Yom Tov is on Sunday, which is after Shabbos, if the egg is laid on Sunday, it means it was prepared on Shabbos. And Shabbos meichen lo Yom Tov. Now we extend it, like we learned, like Zeta, to any day that it's born. Oh, so Rabba subscribes, Rav Islay Achana de Rabba, and therefore he says that if an egg, let's go Shabbos and Sunday Yom Tov, Shabbos and Yom Tov on Sunday. So if the egg was laid on Yom Tov, when was it prepared? The case here is that it was laid on the first day of these 2 holidays. It was laid on Shabbos. When was it prepared? On Friday. Doesn't make sense what the Gemara is saying. What does Achana D'Rabba have to do with our case? All of the 3 cases of Rav, the case that we're learning now, 2 days Yom Tov, 2 days Rosh Hashanah, is always only speaking about the scenario where the egg was born on the first day, and we want to know what status does it have on the second day. So the Gemara is saying that since Rabba subscribes to Achana D'Rabba, therefore he is machmer. No, how does that work? The egg was laid on Shabbos. The day prior to Shabbos is Friday. Friday was a weekday. It was prepared on a weekday. Now, we get it. We learned above that Enochanami, that really Hachana D'Rabba is only going to be where Yom Tov is before Shabbos, and then in extension, we added it to no matter when is Shabbos, to no matter when is Yom Tov. But what does that have to do with our case? So Tosfos here, the second Tosfos, second from the top, the second from the bottom, he explains like this, that when an egg is born on Shabbos, even though, yes, the Gemara said before that the egg is finished, it's finalized, it becomes completed the day prior. But don't discount the act of birth itself. The fact that the egg came into the world on Shabbos, that action makes it available for you to eat it. It's also being prepared. So it was also prepared on Shabbos. So since it was prepared on Shabbos, you may not have it on Sunday. Beautiful. And the same thing in the opposite, that if it's Friday Yom Tov and then the Shabbos, if the egg is laid on Friday, you cannot have it on Shabbos. Why not? Because even though be'emes 99%, the egg that was laid on Friday was finished on Thursday, but still the act of birth, that's the final step in its preparedness. So it was prepared on Yom Tov. The ein Yom Tov mechan lo Shabbos. Guys, this is important, this Tosfos. Okay. So that explains why Rav is machmer, and the only way to explain the leniency of Rabbi Yechanan is by saying that he does not subscribe to Hachana de Rabba. So that's very important. So let's remember, case number one of Rav is Shabbos and Yom Tov consecutive, one back to back with the other. Doesn't matter which one came first. Egg is born on the first of these two holy days. Rav says it may not be eaten on the second one as well. Not only not on the first, not on the second, because there is an act of hachana at birth. And therefore, if you're going to have it the next day, then the day of birth is preparing it for the next day. And no, hachana de Rabba means that if any food is going to be consumed either on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, it needs to be fully prepared on the previous ordinary weekday for it to be eaten on Shabbos or for Yom Tov. Now the Gemara says that this machlokes of Rabbi Yechanan is really katanoi. Tanaim already argued about it. What's the case? No, there was Shabbos. Here, the same case. Egg was born on Shabbos. Says the Tanakh toichel b'Yom Tov. If the following day is Yom Tov, it could be eaten. The Zelbazach also, if the egg was laid on Yom Tov and Yom Tov is Friday, toichel b'Shabbos. This is like Rabbi Yechanan. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, no. Adayin hi machlokes. Only according to Beis Shammai, tei achel. But according to Beis Hillel, which is how we paskin, loy say achel. Now we have a story. Ushbezichnei, the Rav Ada bar Ahava, the host of Rav Ada bar Ahava. So the host had this host that one of his clients was this Amoyner. Hava lehanach beitzim, miyam tov l'Shabbos. So there were eggs that were laid on Friday. Friday was Yom Tov. The host wanted to know whether he can eat the eggs on Shabbos. Rashi says, again, guys, don't forget, on Shabbos you can't cook. So he would have it raw. Also, he went to his client, or he went to his guest, he went to Rav Ada bar Ahava and Omerlei, my le'atvinu ha'idna. He went further. I want to know whether I can roast it now, because you can't roast it on Shabbos. Only to eat it tomorrow. Wow. So Amalei, I don't understand. My daitach, your thinking doesn't make sense. First of all, Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, are you thinking that since Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, the rule is halachic Rabbi Yechanan? Even if that's the case, even if we're going to pass him like Rabbi Yechanan, all Rabbi Yechanan is saying is on the next day you can eat it. On the next day you can handle it. I feel Rabbi Yechanan like kashari elo legoyma alamachid. You can only swallow it raw because our case was that it was hatched. It was laid on Yom Tov. But on the day that it's laid, Rabbi Yechanan also holds like Beis Hillel. You can't even move it. So the question is whether you can swallow it raw. Aval biyoymei, but to handle it on the day that it was laid on Yom Tov avadanish loy and ve'hatanya, that's binichusa. Says in a Beitzah that achas Beitzah shenolda b'Shabbos, achas Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov. Ein metaltal and oisa. We had this above. The Beitzah and Gimel, the first case in the Beitzah and Gimel on the base. You can't handle it, not even to use it as a cover for another utensil, not even to use it as a base for the legs of a bed. Nekuda. So even if you're going to tell me because of the general rule, Rav Rabbi Yechanan, halachic Rabbi Yechanan, it will have nothing to do with you being allowed to fry it or to roast the egg on Friday because it was laid on Friday Yom Tov, and on that day it's completely muktzah. Another story. There was tam a person that came to Rav Papa. Either it was the Balabas or it was another Yid. Havalei hanach beitzim. Here wasn't the opposite. The eggs were laid on Shabbos, and this Yid wanted to eat them on Yom Tov. Again, that's the machlokes Rav and Rabbi Yechanan also lekami. Now he came to Rav Papa on the day that the eggs were laid on Shabbos. And he asked him, will I be allowed to eat these eggs tomorrow? So Rav Papa responds to him, come back tomorrow to address this. And why did he tell him to return? So Rav Papa quotes the Rav, Rav, once he made Kiddush on Yom Tov, even though by the letter of the law, a Rav is not allowed to paskin when the Rav is inebriated. But the moment that dissipates, and it doesn't take 24 hours for it, Danny is making a comment. Inebriated. Shkoyach. So when you are inebriated, then you have to wait until it dissipates. It doesn't take 24 hours, at least by most people. Rav was machmer. He would wait a whole 24 hours before he would paskin. So Rav Papa, Mishum Shechrus, and Rav Papa did the same. In other words, whether at that moment he was after Kiddush or doesn't matter. He would wait. He was sometime after Kiddush, immediately after Kiddush, 6 hours after Kiddush, come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow before he made Kiddush for the next day. This is Shabbos, right, going into Yom Tov. And Kiyasa L'macha, when he came back the next day, so then Amar Lei, Rav Papa tells this Yid, or he tells this host, Abdallah Damid Beis, I want you to know that Iku Hashta, had you not waited until now, then Ishtaloi, I would have made a mistake. I would have forgotten the halacha. I erroneously would have said what we just mentioned above, that generally we have this klal, right? Klali hashas, to paskin, Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, halacha ke Rabbi Yechanan. And I would have said that, but now I remember, right? I would have said, I would have told you Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yechanan, and I would have paskin, yeah, you can have the egg on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos, the next day. Now here it's convenient because on Yom Tov you can cook, you can fry, you can bake. However, now I remembered something. That Ha'amar Rava said, and we paskin like Rava, that Hilchase Kavase de Rav Ba'anatlas, that we do paskin like Rav in all of the three similar but not same cases, where there are 2 days of holiness, one consecutive with the other. Case number one is the case that we are discussing, Shabbos Yom Tov Shabbos. And here Rav is the Machmer, as we just learned. The case number two is 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. Happens to be that Rav was Mekel there. Rav holds that in Chutz La'aretz, if an egg is laid on the first day Yom Tov, you are allowed to eat it, handle it on the second day. And then the third topic, where Rav is one of the two opinions, is the 2 days Rosh Hashanah. And here Rav is Machmer. It's from the three cases, Rav is Machmer. In our case, he's Machmer in the Rosh Hashanah case. Again, the egg is laid on the first day Rosh Hashanah. Question is whether you can eat it on the second day Rosh Hashanah. And Rav Chen Gezak bein l'kula bein l'chumra. And thank God I waited, my chumra of waiting not just until when it dissipates, but waiting a whole 24 hours gave me the opportunity to remember. And he told this Yid, or he told this host, that no, you may not have the egg on Yom Tov, farvas, because it was late on Shabbos. And let's go back to what Tracy was explained, and that's connected to Hachana de Rabbah, that the act of laying an egg itself is the final step of you preparing it. So now that it was prepared on Shabbos, you can't eat it. You cannot eat it on the following day. Now, before we go on to the other two cases, to the second case of Rav, which will be the case of 2 days Yom Tov, we're going to quote a similar scenario to an egg being laid. Very interesting case. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, right? 1, 2, 3, or 4 lines from the top of the Daladam and base. What happens if eitzim shenoshru min hadekel b'Shabbos? So you have a branch. The branch fell off the tree. Now, guys, on Shabbos, there's nothing to talk about. Question is, am I allowed to use that branch next day? That's Yom Tov. Says Rabbi Yechanan, Asur lahasika.
Firewood? What are we talking about?
Firewood. Can use it as firewood. It's mamash similar, right? An egg that's laid on the first day, can it be used on the next day? Rabbi Yechanan was lenient by the case of the eggs. Here is Machmed, Asur lahasika b'Yom Tov. You cannot use it the following day on Yom Tov. And Rabbi Yechanan said himself, Va'al tishiveni Beitzah. Don't challenge me by saying that I was lenient by the Beitzah, why am I being stringent here by this piece of wood, by the branch that fell off the tree? I'll tell you why. My Tama, Beitzah, the reason why I'm lenient, the case there was, again, it was, let's say it came out on Shabbos, and the next day is Yom Tiv. It's either way, but that's just the case that they spoke about. Aside of the muksa issue, which is an issue, but taking away the muksa issue, you are able, I know you can't cook on Shabbos, but you can swallow the raw egg on Shabbos. It's shaykh for you to consume it on Shabbos. And yet, when we paskin, like everyone paskins like Basil, that you for sure may not eat it, you may not even handle it on the day that it was laid. And even Rabbi Yechanan is only lenient by allowing you to use it the next day, but not on the day that it was laid. So Meida Yediya, everyone will remember, even though I'm being lenient by paskening that you can use it on Yom Tiv, but on Shabbos you cannot. The Bas Yoima Asura. Why? Because it's let's go with the approach of Muksa, Noilat. However, in our case, the branches fell off the tree on Shabbos. Since forget about the din of Muksa. You anyways cannot use it. On Shabbos, what exactly will you use a branch for? For nothing. You can't make fire, you can't add the fire. So you not using it on Shabbos doesn't remind you of this whole concept of Noilat on the day is Asr. So the Rabbi Yechanan says, if I would be lenient, if I were to be consistent, then people they would think that on the day that it falls, it's permitted. In other words, what happens if a branch falls on Yom Tov on that day? Then it won't be okay. Then it won't be. People won't know that. The asu, right? The esmal, they're going to only say the esmal. You know why no one used the branch yesterday? Because it was Shabbos. For the chazal asuk. So he says, in my case, I am going to be machmed, and I'm going to tell you that this branch may not even be used next day on Yom Tov. Another case about the topic of a branch falling off a tree. Listen to this. You have a branch that fell directly into an oven. On Yom Tov, what did we just establish from Rabbi Yechanan? Clearly that a branch that falls off a tree is mamish like an egg that was laid on Yom Tov or on Shabbos on that day. Boy, by Yom it's asur. Here it fell into an oven. Says Rav Mashna leniency. It's not a problem, but you know what? I have a solution. You add in the oven wood that you already had prepared to use as fuel for Yom Tov, and umasikan, and you got no problem, and you can heat the oven with it. Now let's not focus b'chlal on how can you move it. Let's not focus on the muksa. Point is that the wood is, let's say, forbidden wood. But if the food will become warmed or cooked or baked, not only from a prohibited wood, but also from a permitted wood, that resolves the problem. Now, there's many challenges with that. So, first of all, forget about the food becoming baked, becoming cooked, becoming warm as a mixture of permitted and prohibited. Before we get there, in other words, you're going to end up handling that branch. It fell off a tree. It was connected to the tree on the beginning of Yom Tov. You got a muksa issue. So the Gemara says, now muksa's bottle. Wow. Even the Ruba de Heteraninu, when we Rav Masna said, you have to be marbe eitzim muchanim. Marbe is meduyak. You have to have roiv, non-muksa pieces of wood. Now we apply the din of bittul. Once you already nullified it. So ki kamahapech, when you are stoking the flames, when you're going to be arranging the woods, behetera kamahapech, aha, bittul. Hold on, classical question. Bittul is never a lechatchila, right? Then he's shaking his head. Bittul is b'di'evet. You can't deliberately nullify an isur. V'tnana Mishnah mefedish that ein vatlin isur lechatchila. Right, the whole case over there in Trumais.
Rabbi,
yes.
you just back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
If you're not able to be mevatel it, what are we allowed to do now? Meaning it fell into the oven. Do we then say we need to let it burn out on its own and then we can use it? Like what's the
correct. Or sweep out the oven sweep it out, and put in wood. And Rav Masna's saying is you can make benefit of it. You can't just light the oven with it, add more wood. The answer is the Gemara. Oh, this is the big Gemara here. You know when? And I know we're going back and forth with muksa. Muksa is the Rabbanan. It's a quasi doiraisa. It's a very stringent Rabbanan. But for this halacha, that ein mevatlin is a lechatchila, the Gemara argues over here. Aval b'derabbanan mevatlin. But we got ourselves a huge problem. What's our problem? What did we learn now? What did we learn on Amud Aleph? Ravashi. What did we learn also on Av Gimel Amud Beis? That says, Kol davar sheyesh lematirin. Afilu b'derabbanan loy batel. This is a classical davar sheyesh lematirin because the problem is muksa. The problem is only that this branch fell off the tree today. Tomorrow the branch is good. So ma'ikala meimar. In other words, forget about mevatlan lechatchil or not. How does nullification even work? It should not become nullified. So the Gemara has a very innovative answer. If when you will benefit from it, it will be a prohibited thing, it's not going to be nullified. When do we benefit, my friends, from wood in an oven? You have a wood. The wood has to first burn. Then it becomes a coal. And then you put food in. By the time you are benefiting from a wood, b'chlal, it's no longer be'en. Hachi over here, mikli kali isuram. The isur is already consumed by the time you're deriving benefit from it. Wow. And therefore, even according to Ravashi, even by a drabanan, this will be nullified because by the time you're deriving benefit from it, the isur is not be'en anymore. Now, don't forget, guys, Rav Masna is not saying that you can just light up the oven. He's not saying that. He's saying you have to add wood. In other words, we're using bittul. We're using bittul lechatchila. The concept of since your benefit is coming only after it's already consumed, after it's burned, that's only to address the problem of a davar sheyesh lematirin. I know we're flying through, but this was very big statements. And that concludes the first of the three Ravs. The first one, Shabbos and Yom Tov, consecutive, one back to the other. Rav was machmer, that if an egg is laid on the first, it also may not be handled, not be eaten on the second. Now we're going to at least start. Let's start case number 2. And this is going to open up the whole topic of 2 days of Yom Tov and Chutz La'aretz, which we call Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Goliyos. That for Yidden that are in Golos, we're speaking about a geographical Golos. You can be in Eretz Yisrael and be in Golos as well, but we are referring to the areas that during the times when we established a calendar by the testimony of witnesses in front of the Sanhedrin, and after we were unable to use the technique of torches, as we'll explain in a moment, so they needed to send physical messenger shluchim, and there's only that much you can travel to come to the places before the 15th of the month. We're focusing on the 15th because Sukkot is on the 15th, because Pesach is on the 15th, and I know the emphasis is that Shavuos is already the 50th day from. We're going to not speak about Shavuos right now, and we're not going to speak about Rosh Hashanah right now, but we're going to focus on the 2 Yomim Tovim. And we know that nowadays, what we call outside Eretz Yisrael, we keep 2 days on Yom Tov, the same kasha. What's the question? What happens if there is an egg? It was laid on the first day. Yes, on the first day it's asur. We're not talking about that. That's the Mishnah. Are you allowed to eat it, to handle it on the second day? Rav Omar, Noil de Bezeh, Muteres Bezeh. Now this l'choura, that's your classical Shtei Kedushas. Shtei Kedushas means, how do we view the second day Yom Tov? And let me explain to you the 2 ways of looking at it. Way number 1 is that there's only 1 day Yom Tov. There's only 1 day Yom Tov. We don't know when the 15th is. So what we call the 15th or what we might call the 16th, either of them, one of them is the 15th, which means, if you want to look at it that way, there's only 1 day Yom Tov. We are keeping 2 because we have a doubt. But if an egg was laid on the first, mimah nafshach, it's allowed to be eaten on the second. Because if the first day was Taka Yom Tov, It was not allowed to be eaten on that day. But today is not Yom Tov at all. Not Yom Tov at all. If today is Yom Tov, so what? It was laid out of Yom Tov. That's perfectly okay for it to be eaten on Yom Tov. Two kedushas. Now, what will be the other side? The other side would be is that since there was a period of doubt, the Chachamim decreed that we have to take the whole 48 hours and view it as one long day. If you view 2 days not as I have a suffix, which one is the day? Yom Tov is only one day. I don't know which one is the day. That's called two kedushas. Yoima Arichta, one day, means that rabbinically, God said Yom Tov is a day is 24 hours. Because of the doubts that they had as to which day is Yom Tov, the Chachamim made an enactment. And they said that you have to view these 48 hours like one long day. If that's the case, an egg that's laid is prohibited on that day. Well, this day is 48 hours. That's the other opinion. Ravasi Omar, Nol de Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. L'choyre, Ravasi subscribes that that's Kedusha Achas. We'll have a problem with Ravasi because, as we will see, it appears that Ravasi doesn't hold Kedusha Achas. So Leima, Frekti Gemara, you telling me that the first white line, that Kosava Ravasi Kedusha Achasi, that it's a rabbinic, one extended period of holiness? Ooh, I know that many people hold that, but not Ravasi. You know what Ravasi used to do? Ravasi Mavdil Miyoyme Travel Lechavre. Ravasi lived in Goliath, Babylonia. Between the first day Yom Tov and the second day Yom Tov, you know what he would make? Not what we do, Kiddush. In there, he would put Havdalah. Now, make no mistake, before we read on, don't think that Ravasi made Havdalah and thus treated after his Havdalah like Chol HaMoed. God forbid, he did not. He did not. But he made Havdalah. The fact that he made Havdalah means that he did not consider it like one Yoima Arichta. No one makes Havdalah in the middle of a day. So we got ourselves a contradiction. Bishitas Rav Ashi, second line in the white lines, clarifies the Gemara. Rav Asi Safuke Misapkali. Rav Asi, it's not that he says it's Yom Arichta, not that he says Shtei Kedushos, he doesn't know how to view it. And that's why, even though he made Havdalah, he mamish kept Yom Tov. Eloma v'avid hachel l'chumra v'hachel l'chumra. So Havdalah he made. Because if it's Shtei Kedushos, just to cover your bases, you make Havdalah. I want to add something. What Rashi says over here. Even if it's Shtei Kedushos, many people did not know how to make a calendar. They didn't have that knowledge. Those people would not make Havdalah, even if they view it as Shtei Kedushos. How can you make Havdalah? You got a suffix, you're making a bracha levatollah. What are you doing? Rav Asi Pashut was an expert in the establishment of a calendar. He knew how to make a calendar. He knew that the first day was Taka the first day. You know why he kept the second day? He kept the second day because maybe he held the Chachamim made azad takana that the 48 hours is one day. If the Chachamim said that, and it's not that I'm just covering my basis because I have a doubt, then you got to keep 2 days Yom Tov. Any Taka kept 2 days Yom Tov. But since he held that maybe the Chachamim never said you have to keep 2 days Yom Tov, we don't know which day is which day. I know. So for that, he made Havdalah. But coming back over here, since it might be considered Kedusha Achas, L'chumra, if an egg was laid on one, it's going to be prohibited on the second, because Take, if it's considered Yoima Arichta, it's still on the same day that it was laid. Amar Rav Zeidom, I want you to know that Kavasi Dravasi Mistabra, we should paskin like this stringent ruling of the egg. And now, guys, I know we learned on top of the Amid that the Rava said we don't paskin like it. Say that, but let's go through all of the Amoraim. Why is that? I'll prove it to you. Because the ha'idna yadi'inan b'kviyusa yarcha. Now, meaning when Rav Zeira made the statement, they knew the chachma, the soid ha'ibur. They knew how when the 30th day will be, when the first day of the month will be. They knew that, and yet continuously the kavdin and today yoima. Why are we making is a proof that what? That the 2 days Yom Tov is not just a doubt because I don't know. Even when you know the Chachamim instituted that they should be viewed as a single extended day of Kedusha. So says Rab Zeira, Says Abaye, Amar Abaye, no, punkt verkehrt. Kavasei the Rav mistabro. I'll prove to you that the Rav is correct. What is correct? That she'enoi choik. I'm reading inside Rashi. The Chachamim never established a single extended day of Kedusha. We have a doubt. So because of our doubt, to cover our bases, we keep both days. How do I know that? The Tanan, here we go. Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, Barishayna, originally, after the Sanhedrin accepted the testimony of witnesses and they were Mekadesh, they sanctified the Rosh Chodesh, Hoya Masi and Masuis, they would light up torches on mountaintops, and one mountaintop will look at the other mountaintop, and that spread very quickly, very far, and everyone knew that which day is Rosh Chodesh. However, says the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah that these kutim, they undermined this entire method because they would light up torches even though there was no such testimony given or accepted in the Sanhedrin. So they made a new method, that messengers have to go out. End of quote. So says Abaye, from the way the Mishnah words it, is mashma that ve'ilu batlu kutim, that if the kutim would stop undermining what we're trying to do, then we would go back. In other words, if we would tack and know when it is of din and chad yoyma. Or similarly, wherever shluchim did reach of din and chad yoyma. Period. Why is that? If the chachamim during a certain time of uncertainty made a takana, made a choik, that we got to view the 48 hours like one day, from then on it should be irrelevant whether we know when Rosh Chodesh is or not. The fact that it's mashma from the Mishnah that it's only because we don't have a method is the charaya that if we do make a method, you only have to keep one day. In other words, we keep 2 days out of doubt. This is not about after Hillel made the calendar. We'll continue with that with the next year. Now we have a calendar that was affixed. We'll get to that later. But the point is that Rav Paskins is halacha based on the concept that we view 2 days of Yantiv and Golios not like a rabbinically ordained 48-hour extended day. No, there's only one day Yantiv. We did not know when it is. To cover our bases, we keep 2 days. Shtei kedushos mimanav shach. The egg is allowed to be consumed on day number 2. God willing, to be continued. 3, 4, 5. Okay, Gavaldik.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Question here.
Yes.
We're talking about Yantav Sheni Shofelius, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean anywhere outside of Eretz Yisrael or anywhere outside of the area of Yerushalayim where the messengers could reach?
Exactly the latter, what you said. It's where the messengers did not reach. And I'll tell you more than that. There were certain areas that are relatively close to Yerushalayim, but during those times, Yidden did not live there. So the messengers never got there. So the few exceptions, the few Yiddelach that lived there, they, because of the suffix, they would keep 2 days Yantiv. And we're going to learn about Minakam and Senevi. Then we're going to do this.
And theoretically, if there were Jews living outside Eretz Yisrael, but close enough, then they would only keep 1 day according to this, right?
Shluchim Agata has nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael, correct? It has to do with
where the rest of the messengers got.
Mamish, yeah.
So why today in Israel would you say that people are outside, maybe who didn't get it? Why do they keep only 1 day?
For example, where are Jews living right now that they did not live during the times of the Sanhedrin?
No, I'm saying you just said that there were people, even if they were close to Yerushalayim, if they didn't get the news, they would keep 2.
No, yeah, but no, they got the news. I'm saying if there was no Yishuv of Yidden there, I think there are places. I think there are places that are geographically close enough for shluchim to get there within the 12 days. Don't forget, you can't travel on Shabbos.
Right. So why Elat? So why is there the suffix with Elat? What's the point of that?
Suffix of Elat is because maybe Yidden did not live there.
No, but practically today, anyone from Israel keeps 1 day, right?
I don't know. Do people in Elat keep 1 day or 2 days? I don't know the Mitzvahs. Can you Google it? Find out.
There's some suffix there. People say to keep 2. I don't know how it works.
I know that. I'm saying, why is there a suffix there? Because it's possible that this.
No. I thought the suffix in Elat is it considered part of Israel or not? It's not considered part of Israel.
So but we just established that it's nothing to do. we just established it has nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael.
Jonathan, if it was not part of Eretz Yisrael, then it means that Yidden did not live there. It's connected. Why would Yidden live there? All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah Daf Hey. We left off mamish in the heart of the sugya of how are we to view the 2 days of Yom Tov, known as the 2 days of Yom Tov in Golus. And the two options are, do we view both days like one extended day, meaning that since there was a time that people there did not know when the first day of the month is, subsequently they did not know when the 15th day of the month is. So therefore they kept Yom Tov out of doubt. The Chachamim went ahead and they said, Oy bazoi, you have a doubt, you have to view the 48 hours like one long day. If there was such a rabbinic enactment, then it's taka viewed as one long day, and therefore, for example, if an egg was laid on day number 1, it will remain prohibited on day number 2 because halachically it's still considered day number 1. Or the other option is that the 2 days of Golius is viewed as Shtei Kedushas. Shtei Kedushas means, of course, that there was a time that people had a suffix, which day is the first day, which day is the 15th day. So they kept 2 days out of doubt, but there was never a decree making them into one long day. Shtei Kedushas. And therefore, if an egg is laid on day number 1, it mimanav shach will be allowed to be eaten and handled on day number 2. Explaining, if day number 1 was taka the 15th of the month, let's say the 15th of Nisan was Pesach, on that day you can't eat it. But the issur of having an egg that's laid is only by Bayom. 16th is day number 2. If the second day is Yom Tov, it was laid on Erev Yom Tov. By Tov, you can eat it on Yom Tov. So mimanav shach, you can eat it. And just quickly taking a step back, the sugya began on Daf Daled and based on the top, where Rav Papa quoted the Rava who says that regarding the 3 arguments between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, we always paskin like Rav, bein l'kula, bein l'chumra. And the first of which we already concluded in last Daf, and that is when Shabbos and Yom Tov consecutively fall one day back to back with the other. Question is, egg born on the first day of Kedusha, could it be handled and or consumed on the second day? We paskin like Rav. Rav there was machmir. We are in middle of the second machloikis. Here it's between Rav and Ravasi regarding an egg that was laid on the first day of Yom Tov, whether it could be consumed or handled on the second day of Yom Tov of Golos. Here Rav is the lenient one, and he says that noyla bozeh muteres bozeh. Ravasi is the machmir, and what we're going to have on Daf Hey, first of all, we're going to speak about we're going to get into already the third case. After finalizing how are we to view 2 days of Yom Tov of Golus, we're going to speak about the third case of the Machlokes B'Shitas Rav, and Rav opines that if you have 2 days Rosh Hashanah, egg that's noilad on the first day is asur on the second day, and we're going to go into something unique that is negeya dafke to Rosh Hashanah. We're going to learn about a takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that changed a prior takana concerning until what time of the day can you accept the witnesses on the end of the first day Rosh Hashanah. We're going to learn the very important rule that whenever there was a gathering of the Sanhedrin, and by vote they enacted a rule, it's called kol davar shebeminyan tzarech minyan acher lahatiroi. Even if the reason that they gave, the reason for which they made a certain enactment, we know is no longer existent, the rule doesn't automatically fall away. You have to have another convening of the Sanhedrin. You have to have another ruling, and we'll see how that is going to be very negeya to our topic of a change that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made, and yet it might or might not b'chlal affect the question of an egg that's born on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, whether it could be consumed on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And finally, on the Afayamid base, we're going to see the source for nowadays that even in Eretz Yisrael, we all keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah. And I'll tell you more than that. When it comes to Rosh Chodesh, so the Seder is like this, that the lunar cycle is really 29 and a half days plus a bit. 29 and a half days. So a Chodesh should have Chavtes Yom, or a Chodesh should have Lamed Yom. And during the times of the Sanhedrin, there was only 1 day Rosh Chodesh. So either the prior month had 29 days, the next day was not day 30, the next day was day number 1, Or if witnesses did not see the new moon, or for whatever other reason, Beis Din did not want to accept witnesses that saw the new moon, and they were not Mekadosh the Chodesh, then the prior month had 30 days. Day 30 was not Rosh Chodesh, it was the 30th day of the previous month. Day number 1 was Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh was 1 day. We'll explain at the end of today's daf why Dafka Rosh Hashanah, and only Rosh Hashanah, right? Both days are Rosh Hashanah, but Yom Aleph Rosh Hashanah is Aleph B'Chodesh, and Beis Rosh Hashanah is Beis B'Chodesh. And this is dissimilar to all the other 2 days Rosh Chodesh, mind you. Today, when you have 2 days Rosh Chodesh, Yom Lamed is Aleph the Rosh Chodesh. Yom Beis the Rosh Chodesh is Yom Aleph L'Chodesh, correct? But that's not the case of Rosh Hashanah. It's taka 2 days, but the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Dafka, not the 30th of Elul. Nowadays, the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Yom Aleph. The second day Rosh Hashanah is Yom Beis. So you can ask, if it's Yom Beis L'Chodesh, why is it Rosh Hashanah? That will become clarified in Daf Hey in the end, and a lot more, God willing. Let us start on Daf Daled Amud Beis. We are up to 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Again, we're focusing back on the machlokes between Rav and Rav Asi regarding 2 days of Yom Tov in Golus. Egg was laid on day number 1. Whether that egg will be permitted or not, Rav says yes. Shtei kedushos, kedusha achas, and now says the Gemara that ver hashta nowadays the yodinen b'kviya the yarcha. Now we know exactly when Rosh Chodesh is. Now the last halachic nasi that we had in the Holy Land was Hillel the minor, and because of him knowing that the institution of real smicha, not the heter hayra'ah that we also alluded to in the introduction to this Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Hey Amud Beis, but real smicha no longer exists. And therefore, in order to be able to establish the calendar, you have to have a convention of smuchim. So Hillel gathered the Sanhedrin, and until the coming of Mashiach, he established the calendar, and we are all bound by his calendar. Now there's no issue. You don't need torches, and you don't need shluchim. Everyone knows when the first day of the month is. Everyone knows when the 15th day of the month is. So now the question is, my kam of din and trei yom. Why do we keep 2 days Yom Tov? And let me explain the question. If we would have paskined like Rav Asi, at least l'chumra, if we would have paskined that because of the times when there was a doubt, the Chachamim made a choik. They made a rule that we are to view both days of Yom Tov like one single extended time of holiness, Yom Arichta. If that would have been the case, now we understand why we still have to keep it, because no one today has the power to undo that. But now that we actually are following Rav, and we already said, Rava says in these 3 arguments, including the one that we are focusing on, we paskin like Rav. Rav's din that an egg that was laid on day number 1 of Yom Tov is allowed on day number 2 is predicated on Shtei Kedushas. If you follow Shtei Kedushas means the sages never made an enactment. They never said, the 48 hours is like 1 day. No, they never said that. There's only 1 day Yom Tov. I'm keeping 2 because I don't know. But now I do know. Now I know when the 15th is. So why are we keeping 2 days Yom Tov? Answers the Gemara, Mishum, the Sholchum, Mitam. That's an expression in the Gemara, classical. They sent from there, meaning they sent from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel the following. Hizoharu, be careful. Al pi Chasidus, Hizoharu means we should shine. B'mineg avoseichem b'yadechem. Yeah, it's not the rabbinic enactment. But now there is a concept of us giving continuity to the minig of our forefathers. But we add something. We're adding something important. What are we adding? That since Zimnin, most people are familiar with the words minig avoseinu biyodenu, or here minig avoseichem biyadechem. Indeed, these are the words that they sent from Eretz Yisrael. The next liner is extremely important, and it's much less known. Zimnin the Gozru Hamalchus Gezed. There might come a time in Golus that the Goyim will make decrees prohibiting Yidden to learn Torah, including us not being allowed to learn the Soid Ha'ibur. And nowadays we have, it's not a secret, there's the Soid, the mystical part of the Torah. The astronomy is called Soid, not because it's mystical, it's because Rabbeinu HaKadosh on purpose, and Ve'imai, all of the Tanoim, never wrote, not in Mishnah, not in Beitzah, not in Tosefta, not in the Sifra, not in the Sifri, not in the Zohar. You're not going to find what we have today in the Rambam. And the Rambam only recorded the way you make a calendar, literally taking it away from it being a secret, because we have the calendar of Hillel. Now, this Gemara was said before the Rambam. So there was a time, right, that select people, it was oral Torah, purely oral. It was never put in written at all. So people still knew, aside of Hillel, people knew how to make a calendar. And that was extremely useful, because if you had a group of Yidden that were in a location, like today, how do you know what Hillel said? I don't know. I go to my Zmanim in my computer. They didn't have it then. The way they knew Hillel's calendar is that they learned what Hillel taught. They learned the Torah. So what's going to be if there's going to be a group of Yidden that they're going to lose it? They're going to forget. Why would Yidden forget? Yidden would never forget. The Goyim would make a gezerah. That's just an example. There would be a pocket of time in a location where Yidden, God forbid, will not be allowed to learn Torah. And then once leave, make 2 days. Because when you make 2 days, even if, God forbid, you make a mistake in making the cheshbonos, you make a mistake with 1 day. I would have made a mistake more than that. So it's not just minig aviseinu biyodenu or minig aviseichem biyodeichem. It's minig aviseinu biyodenu, because if there'll be a time where we won't have access to the knowledge of how to make a calendar and to know what Hillel said and how to follow it, then we can make a mistake again. So it's to cover our bases, we keep 2 days. But that's very important. It's to cover our bases.
According to that, even in Eretz Yisrael, they should do 2 days, no?
No. Because in Eretz Yisrael, they never kept 2 days. They never kept 2 days. It's very important. No one is going to say that because we might forget a Torah, you know what, don't eat a certain type of meat, because maybe we'll forget the Torah, and so don't eat, cover your, but we don't do that. That we don't do. But since in Golus, they anyways were keeping 2 days Yom Tov because they didn't know, then Hillel sent a formula many years later. And he paskin, we're following this, and we follow that now. So they sent, listen, now that you have the formula, maybe you won't have the formula. Maybe you won't be passed to a certain place. Keep on doing what you did. It's different. We're giving continuity to the minig aviseinu. Okay. And now, Chevra, 3 lines from the bottom, the third argument, and that will go until the end of Daf Hey. Itmer Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah. Same case. Of course, an egg that is laid on day number 1 may not be eaten on day number 1. An egg that's laid on day number 2, of course, may not be eaten on day number 2. That shitas Beis. Question is, if it was laid on the 1st, can you have it on the 2nd? Rav and Shmuel, Domri Tarvayu. Here Rav is Machmir, that noil de bezeh, Asura bezeh. Look inside Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. Because here, by Rosh Hashanah, Shehem Vadai, Choik, Kavua. Here, for sure, the sages made as a decree that Liyois Kiyoim Aruch Midrabanan. And Rashi adds, why is Rosh Hashanah different? Shemetchila Loimach Masafik is Chilula Soisan. It wasn't like there was never a doubt, as we'll say in a moment. From the outset, they enacted for it to be viewed as one long day. Let's go back in the Gemara. And the Tnan, where did they get that from? So again, Bereshayna, again, a Mishnah, we had this in the last year, we learned about the Mishnayos over there in Rosh Hashanah. The one that we quoted above is a Mishnah Daf Chav Beis. Now we're going on a Mishnah Daf Lamed, all the Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, that Bereshayna, hay mekabelin edus hachodesh kol hayom. Whether you have the word kulei, whether you don't have the word kulei, Chaver, we're speaking about the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Let's just talk it out by heart. So we need to have, there's no calendar at all. You need to have witnesses testifying that today is Rosh Chodesh. The witnesses had to testify in front of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin do not convene at night. So let's say like this, the 29th of Elul is never going to become day number 1. The night of the 29th, the night going into the 30th, Oir L'Yoim Lamed, that is where the doubt would begin. In Yerushalayim, in the Sanhedrin, in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. That night, everyone would begin like Yom Tov, misafik. You have to do that because you don't know whether witnesses will come tomorrow or not. Now let's walk through the day. What were to happen if witnesses taka come tomorrow? Everyone began that day Yom Tov, Shalom Al Yisrael. Then witnesses came and they testified that today is Rosh Chodesh, meaning today is Rosh Hashanah. That would be it. That will be one day Rosh Hashanah. But listen to what happened. And until when can the witnesses come? Until the end of the day. However, Pamachas, there was one time that Nishto ha'edem lavoi, the Edom were for some reason delayed in coming. And what's the downside? Like I mentioned, everyone is keeping Yom Tov out of doubt from the night prior. You know what the problem was? Says the Mishnah, Dafei on the top, V'niskalkalu halaviyim b'shir. They made a mistake. They erred when they were singing the shir Shal Yoim connected with the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim. And Rashi adds information that's vital. When it came to the morning Talmud, since in most cases, Edom, they would never linger until the end of the day, but they would not rush to come early in the morning. So it was common that even though it's Rosh Hashanah, the shir Shal Yoim of the morning for the Talmud Shal Shachar was a weekday one. And it didn't bother us that Kiddush was made the night before. We're speaking about Rosh Hashanah. People were keeping that day as Rosh Hashanah until the witnesses come in the Beis Hamikdash. It was accepted that the song, the lyrics, the Kapitel Tehillim connected to the weekday was sung with the Talmud Shal Shachar. But normally the Edom would come before the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim. And over here they came one so late that Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim was sung with the capital of a weekday. But this is something that you cannot fix. Now everyone jumps, including Tosfos. Isn't there a much bigger problem? If they came mamash at the end of the day, in other words, the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim was already brought, what about the Karban Musaf of Rosh Hashanah? Did we not learn, my friends, together in Yuma, right? Oleha Hashlem Kol HaKarbanis Kulam. We learned some Psachim was the exception. That what? That after the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim, you cannot bring any more Karbanis. So why are we focusing on the kilkul? We're not minimizing the kilkul, that the wrong lyrics were used, the wrong kapitel was said, but something much graver happened. No musaf was brought. So Tosfos writes that even though, yes, there's a rule and there's a positive commandment that on the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim you should conclude that day's Mizbeach service, but if in a case where the Edom here came after the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim, they brought the Karban Musaf. They did not lose the Karban Musaf. The problem is that you could not fix that which you already sung, the melody that you used, the shir, for the Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim. So listen to this. So Iskinu, they made a takana that shelo yiyu mekablim eso Edom ela ad hamincha. The time for them to come is until when you bring the mincha, the afternoon mincha, the Beis Hamikdash. And the imbo Edom and mincha lomayla, and then they enacted, and if Edom come after mincha, noihagin oisa hayoim kodesh ulamachar kodesh. This is the key of the whole daf. Let's read inside Rashi. Ad mincha, right, 5-6 lines from the top. They can only come ad hakravos Talmud Shal Bein Ha'arbayim. Aval achar mikan oisa hayoim. Guys, less halkop here. Who meubar, that day is day 30, and umaynin miyoim hamachras liyam hakipurim. When you counted then, what day is Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah, to know what day is Yom Kippur, the 10th, to know when the day is the 15th, you would count it not from the day that the witnesses came, you count it from the next day. That year, that day was 30. Very important. Not the way it is today, my friends. Today, 2 days Rosh Hashanah, day number 1 is Yom Aleph L'Chodesh. Here, Rashi wants to make it clear. They made a takana that if the witnesses come after Mincha, that day remained holy. But not Yom Aleph. It remained Yom Lamed. It's amazing. Alma, what do we see? How can that be? What do we see? 14 lines from the top in Rashi. Chilas Asiya Shnei Yomim l'Rosh Hashanah Afilu bebeis den have v'loy misafik. That in a case where you did not have a doubt. Why did you not have a doubt? When you did not have a doubt, because if they made a takana, my friends, that you cannot accept Edom after Mincha. If you cannot accept Edom until Mincha, that means tomorrow is Yom Aleph. Tomorrow was Yom Aleph. But since you began keeping Yom Tov ready from the night before, they did not want for people to say, anyways, tomorrow is Aleph, let me chaparain for the last couple of hours of today, and to treat it like a weekday. They did not allow you to do it. They were afraid you're going to be mezalzel in the whole day. So you have to continue to keep Yom Lamed. Lamed is not Aleph. I know today people think Rosh Chodesh, Lamed is Aleph, Rosh Chodesh. There was no such a thing then. Lamed is the last month. Knowing that it's Lamed, only counting tomorrow as Yom Aleph. Yom Kippur is 10 days from tomorrow. Today was still holy. Why? There's no suffix here. That's the pshat that the Chachamim enacted in this case. I'm speaking about in this case because there was times, my friends, if the Edom came in the morning, and then there will be only one day Rosh Hashanah. There would be only one day Rosh Hashanah. But the fact that there was a scenario where if the Edom came too late, you accepted the Edom, but you established tomorrow as Yom Aleph, but today is still Yom Tiv, you have to finish today as Yom Tiv. That's pshat that, and God says Yom Teruah is one day. Rosh Hashanah in the Torah is called Yom Tiv. It's one day. Why are you keeping it for 48 hours? Midrabanan, the whole 48 hours is one day. Yom Arichta. I just want to emphasize that the way we are explaining Gemara Rashi here, the Yom Arichta then is not like it is now. I want to make that clear. Like I mentioned, because then it was Lamed. Lamed wasn't Rosh Chodesh and Aleph. Today it's Aleph and Beis, and that's huge. But let's go over here. So that's Rav and Shmuel Zerayah, that you see that it's viewed, at least in this case, like a Yom Arichta. Therefore, an egg that was laid on one day remains asur on the next day. Okay, now here we go. Amar Rabbo, mitakonas Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai ve'elach. Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, he convened the Sanhedrin and he overturned what we just learned in the Mishnah. The whole problem with accepting Edom after Mincha Ulamayla is because niskalkalu halaviyim b'shir, and after the Churban Habayis, there is no shir of the Leviyim, there's no karbanis. So there's no kilkul anymore. And he actually said that what? That if the Edom, no matter until when they come, if they come a minute before Shkia, that was the only day Rosh Hashanah. The next day will not be Rosh Hashanah. And that day is Yom Aleph. So Oy Bazoi. Now that we keep 2 days, why do we keep 2 days? Because we don't know which day was established to be Rosh Hashanah. That's the sugya that we had in the last daf. That should be like 2 days of Goliath. That should be Shtei Kedushos. That's only our suffix. So Oibazoi says, Rabba, Beitzah Muteres. Now, Rav and Shmuel's din, he argues with him. Rav and Shmuel's din is based on the Mishnah. That Mishnah was overturned. The Tanan, like we learned, that Mishachara Beis HaMikdash, Hiskin Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, Sheyu Mekablam Eidos HaChodesh, Kol Hayoim. Why do we keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah? Mamash like two, because we did not know what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. We did not know after the Churban Beis Hamikdash what happened in the Sanhedrin. We're far away from the Sanhedrin, but that's our doubt. So Miman Avshach, the second day should be permitted. That is what Rabbo says. Now Rabbo won't stand. The Gemara is going to challenge Rabbo. Amalei Abaye, hold on. Didn't Rav and Shmuel lived many years after the Churban Habayis? Rav and Shmuel both said Beitzah is Asura. So says Rabba, so what? I'm quoting you Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai. I'm quoting you a Tana, and you're challenging me from Rav and Shmuel. I stand. The problem is, how can Rav and Shmuel argue with the Tana? Or Rav and Shmuel, Taka Kasha must listen. So answers the Gemara, why Kasha? That even nowadays, that will be the nafkamino. Halon, halahu. Wow. Zakt Rashi, the first line under the Gemara, Halon, halahu. The Bnei Eretz Yisrael. Second line under the Gemara, Sha'oisim, Yoim Echad. Indeed, since they only have 1 day, so the egg that was laid on the first day will be permitted on the next day. Avolididon, which is B'nei Goyla, Asura, Shaharei Adayin, Anu Oisim Shnei Yamim, we are still keeping 2 days, and V'oidenu Kibatchila. You see, my friends, here's the point. In Eretz Yisrael, they made a change. In outside Eretz Yisrael, no change affected them. No change. We never knew before which day was the day of Rosh Chodesh, and we don't know nowadays. But there's a difference between Rosh Hashanah and 2 days of Goliath, like we quoted, because 2 days of Goliath were passing like Rav. There was never a takana that was made. We don't know what day is the 15th. Okay, and now Minig Avisenu B'Yadem. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah, Bisman HaBayis, there were times that Beis Din knew when Rosh Hashanah is. The Eidim came after Mincha. They knew today should really be Yom Aleph. They rejected it. But they said it's still Yom Tiv. Today is 30. Tomorrow is Aleph. So there was a time during the times of the Beis Hamikdash where in Eretz Yisrael, they would keep 2 days, even though the second day was Yom Aleph. Why? Because Yom Arichta. In Eretz Yisrael, where they changed that, they went back to only keeping 1 day. If Edom came, I don't care until it kept 1 day. That broke the Yom Arichta. That broke it. Says Rav and Shmuel, since in Chutz La'aretz. Forget about the lumdus behind it. The reality is that we never knew when it is. We kept then 2 days, we kept now 2 days. Since then, originally, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah is Yom Arichta. Nothing changed for us to be able to view it otherwise. Even though in Eretz Yisrael, they made a change. But don't forget that in Eretz Yisrael, if you lived near the Sanhedrin, you only kept 1 day. Rabbi Yosef Amar, Af mitakonas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach, even in Eretz Yisrael, even in Israel, a Beitzah Asura. You know why the Beitzah remains Asur? All Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did was that he convened the Sanhedrin and he paskined that you can accept the Eidim even after Mincha, even after the time of Mincha. Fine. But he never convened to paskin about the din of an egg. And since the din was before the takon of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, based on Rosh Hashanah being viewed sometimes as Yom Arichta, that Noel the Bezu, Asura Bezu, you have to convene a Beis Din to overrule that part as well. Because that's called the Davar Shevabinyan, the Chol Davar Shevabinyan, anything that the Sanhedrin enacted based on convening and counting the votes, Sarech Minyan Achala Tiroi, and there was no such reconvention discussing the din of an egg, Noel the Bezu, whether it's Muteris or Asura Bezu. Now, where do we get this rule from? And we're going to spend a nice shtickle on that. Why not? Why don't we just say, I know the reason why they made the takana. The reason is no longer standing, so let the takana fall by the side automatically. So no, Amar Rabbi Yosef, I'll tell you where I know it from. And he brings not 1, not 2, but 3 sources. And we'll see why he needs all 3. Source number 1, it says in Parshas V'aschanan that Moshe Rabbeinu told the Eden after Maimed Har Sinai, Lech Emoir Lahem. God told Moshe Rabbeinu after Maimed Har Sinai, you Moshe, tell the people, Shuvu Lachem Lo Elechem, go back to your tents, which means you are allowed to be with your wives, a mitzvah to be with your wives. I'm already speaking out what the Gemara says in Amud Beis. Question is, we know why we needed to be separated from our wives in order for us to have the standard of Tahara, to be able to have Matan Torah, to hear God Almighty speaking directly to us, which is what happened. But since Maimed Har Sinai already was over, the reason for the Perisha was Hachana LaMatan Torah. Shouldn't it automatically be self-understood that now after Matan Torah we should be allowed to go back to our homes? But nevertheless, we find that since we were, I know that's not the Sanhedrin, it was God, it's the same concept. If God said you may not do something, even though we know why, for that to become permitted, God himself has to tell us now you could. That's proof number 1. Proof number 2 is also connected to what happened in Har Sinai, but not regarding human behavior, but regarding the animals. That we needed to physically fence off Har Sinai, not to allow animals to graze on the mountain. And yet it says, that after the blowing of the shofar, at the end of the event, then then they are allowed to go up the mountain. Again, why was that even needed? And now a third proof, and this is from a Mishnah in Meiser Sheni. Now the Mishnah, Hashgacha Pratis, for those of us who are learning the daily Rambam, right, today we made a siyum on Netar Avoy, but we learned that Netar Avoy is like Meiser Sheni. That means that in the Holy Land, the produce that grows in its halachic 4th year is holy. It belongs to you, but you, me, the owner, the one who grew it, has to take it to Yerushalayim, or they can redeem it on money, and they can take the money and in Yerushalayim buy only food, drink, or something that you will anoint yourself with. However, came along the Chachamim Midrabanan, and they said that you may not always redeem the Netar Avoy on money. If you live more than a day's travel's distance from Yerushalayim in all of the directions, no matter what direction, so it's take, let's say, difficult for you to take the produce, only then are you allowed to redeem it. But says the Mishnah that Kerem Revoyim, Hoya Oil Yerushalayim, you would have to actually bring up the grapes themselves if you lived Mahalach Yom Echad L'chol Sad or closer. Only if you lived further than Mahalach Yom Echad were you allowed, and this is a rabbinic law. Now, and V'zui Tchuma, okay, where is that boundary? So Elas from the south, that's our Girsa, Min Adorim, Akravas, the Girsa is Min Atzafayim, Lud, Min Hamaydiv, and the Jordan River, Min Hamizrach. And Amar Ulavi Temer Abba Bar Bar Chanan Rabbi Yechanan. My Tam, why did the Chachamim say you cannot redeem it? Really, there's a Gzeira Shava comparing Kerem Revoy, Neta Revoy, and Meiser Sheni. Why did they insist you taking the actual produce? Kedela Atar Shuk Yerushalayim Bepeiros. We wanted for the cities, for the markets in the city of Yerushalayim to have an abundantly well-stocked amount of produce. Because since everyone went to Yerushalayim to spend their Meiser Sheni money on food, we wanted for there to be a tremendous amount of supply. So if everyone is going to go there with money, who's going to bring the produce? At least the Kerem Revoy made its way to Yerushalayim. Now, my friends, it's self-understood. We only care about the markets of Yerushalayim. Bisman Beis Hamikdash Chaim. When the Romans, we want for their markets to be full, right? It should be self-understood l'chora that after the Churban Abayis, there is no such a decree. Nevertheless, yet Betanya Kerem Revoy Hoyolei Rabbi Eliezer to the Mizrach of Lud. That means it's within. Lud is from the Maidiv, so it was closer. It's within the day's walk, and exactly where Beitzah Kfar Tavi Daf Heyam and Beis, and because of the rabbinic enactment, Rabbi Eliezer thought that he's obligated to bring all of the produce right from his Kerem to Yerushalayim, and he was unable to do so. And the only eitzah was ubikesh lafkir alaniyim. Making it hefked would not retroactively take away any obligation. No, it's not shayach. It's not tumas u'maisis. Like Rashi says, he felt I cannot go to Yerushalayim. It's lost for me. I might as well give it to tzedakah. However, Amru like Talmidav, Rebbe, no, you don't know information that there was actually a new convention after the time where the Romans took over the Shuka Yerushalayim and Vihitiru. Here again, why did they have to reconvene? And by the way, who are the Chaverim of Rabbi Eliezer, Man Chaverecha, Rabbi Yechanan and Zakkai? In other words, time of the Nimnu, Haloi Nimnu, then Loi. Even though, why can't we just say on our own? The whole takana was in order to be Ma'ater Shuka Yerushalayim. Who cares if the Romans have it now? I know we don't care anymore, but once they made that takana, you have to have another convention of the Sanhedrin to undo it, to rescind, to take it back. Now the question is, why did the Beitzah have to give three proofs? Now we're going to explain proof number one, proof number two, proof number three, and why each one was not sufficient, which is why you need yet the other. Ksivit says, and now we're going back and forth from Yisroi to Vaschanan, but it's all about the prep of Maimon Har Sinai, that God told us, hey, you that the al tikshu el isha, in other words, the separation of couples was a hachana l'matan Torah, and as we learned, it wasn't for the men, it was for the women, because really the tumas keri is resolved by going to the mikvah, right, and waiting at night max. So men could have gone to the mikvah Friday afternoon. No, but the problem is that the zera, that was we learned at Anida, that the zera can live in the woman's body for up to 72 hours, and if any of the man's zera leaves her body, she becomes tameh b'tumas keri. After that amount of time, the sperm dies, so it doesn't give her the tumas keri. But all of that was a hachana from Matan Torah. So why did God have to tell us explicitly? Lechem or lehem shu lechem lo lechem. It's self-understood. It's after the Torah was given. Shema Mina has to be told again, because once we were told you may not be with your wife, you need to have another statement permitting it. Called Davar Shebeminion. I know it's not Davar Shebeminion, it was God, but it's the same concept. There was an enactment by the ultimate source. Now, isn't this a great proof? Why do we need more proofs? So the Gemara says, and if you would counter argue that it's not that we would have thought that we're not allowed to have marital relations. We wouldn't have thought that. We understood the reason is no longer existent. maybe God is giving us a mitzvah to be with our spouses. It's not to take away a prohibition, it's to give us a mitzvah. You can say there's a mitzvah that we had prior to Matan Torah, now it's after Matan Torah. We have to be told now there's a mitzvah to be for a couple to be together. So therefore we bring another raya where there's no mitzvahs to behemoths. That after the blowing of the shofar, after Ma'amad Har Sinai, now the animals can graze. And the same thing, Michti, the Gemara is asking, it says in Yisrael, Gam Hatsoin. No, this is written in Kisisa. Gam Hatsoin, Vahabakar al Yiru el Mul Hahar. And that was because of us about to receive, Kisisa is about Luchashniyas, that we were about to get to Torah again. So isn't it self-understood that after Yom Kippur that the animals can graze? Indeed, self-understood, but it's not enough. Because once we were told that the animals may not graze on Mount Sinai, for it to become permitted, I don't care if the reason went away. God has to tell us. Now, the final insufficiency with this is that here we're speaking about a commandment from God. That you have to have a counter. But and let's not forget, my friends, that this whole rule, the lachatchila dika rule of Yoima Arichta, and that is that even if Edom come after Mincha, we don't accept their testimony to make today and not tomorrow. Both days are Rosh Hashanah. Today is Lamed, and the next day is Yom Aleph. And then they change that. That's all of the Rabbanon. Why do they have to change it? So Tashema, Kerem Revoy, that's the whole Beitzah of Kerem Revoy, that Kerem Revoy, that takana, that if you live 1 day's distance or less close to Yerushalayim, you may not redeem your produce. That whole takana is only midrabanan, la'ater shuka Yerushalayim. And you would think that automatically after the Romans took over, we would not care. We don't care. Adarabah. Nevertheless, that Rabbi Eliezer needed to be notified that they actually paskent in the Sanhedrin. Okay. So all of this, going back to Rabbi Yosef says that even though Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai made a convention and he overturned the rules of accepting the testimony of witnesses, but there was never such a convention made regarding Beitzah. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan also convened Rabbi Yochanan v'shayrua. That's not true, the Gemara says. That ki imnu, the only reconvention and voting and counting was regarding Edus. But a Beitzah loy imnu. So says the Gemara, Amalei Abaya, who cares? You know when you need to have another convention, if you had a prior convention, was there ever a convention about an egg? This is a Gavaldik Kasha that stands. There was never a discussion in the Sanhedrin regarding an egg that was born, that was laid on one day, whether it's permitted on the next day. There was never such a convention. The whole din of a Beitzah is an outgrowth, is a consequence from the Gezerah regarding receiving testimony. And therefore, when the testimony was overturned, the egg should be overturned. No, Beitzah be'edus talia milsa. So therefore, itzar edus, itzar Beitzah. However, now that Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai, I know, only convened regarding edus, but once ishtarei edus, then ishtarei Beitzah, and therefore he holds that after the defending Rabbah, that Beitzah muteres. Weiter says the Gemara, other opinions, Rav Ada and Rav Shalman, Tarvayu, and both of them live in the city of Kiloichis. They say that af mitakonas Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai ve'elach. Nevertheless, the egg that was laid on the first day remains usher on the second day. Why? Another approach. Because my Tama, since Mehedi Yibana Beis Hamikdash, the temple is about to be rebuilt. And people might erroneously say, last year we had the egg on the second day. Hashtanami, they would let us eat it. But once the temple is going to be rebuilt and we're going to go back to receiving testimony from witnesses, and we will never receive their testimony after Mincha, And if they come after Mincha, what's going to happen? We're going to have this like interesting psak din. On one hand, we will not establish today as day number 2, as day number 1. We won't. Today will remain 30. Tomorrow will be day number 1. But today remains Yom Tiv. How can that be? Because we view it as one long day. And we won't know the shtake kedusha saying. Now that we're back to the Beis Hamikdash, now that we're back to being Mekabel Edus, and that's the ideal way of establishing the calendar, kedusha achasi. So for that kilkul not to happen, therefore, these two Ravad and Shalman hold that Beitzah Asura. Problem is, why are we allowed to receive testimony nowadays? Edus Nabi Lo Mekabel after the time of Mincha. My Tama, why don't we say the same takana that Mehedi Yibana Beis Hamikdash and V'Yoimru? We're going to say erroneously, Ishtaket last year, Mila Kabal Ma'ir Zachodesh Kol Hayim Kuloi. So Hashanah Mekabel. Why don't we have that fear? Says the Gemara, apples and oranges. How can you compare one case to the other? Hachi Hashta over there. Who receives testimony from Edus? The Sanhedrin. They won't make such a mistake. Edus Masrola Beis. They know Nafkamina. They know that when you have a Beis Hamikdash, the kilkul of the shiur does not allow you to receive the testimony. If you sung them the shiur, the lyrics of the weekday, that's it. It remains Yom Lamed. Yom Tiv, Yom Lamed. Tomorrow, Yom Aleph. But Beitzah, this is not brought to the Sanhedrin. This is everyone has chickens. Everyone at least used to have chickens. Now with COVID, everyone has chickens. Beitzah Chamasruah. And you have to take that, not to get confused. We stand with the psak din of Rav that shenol the bezu asura bezu says Rava, and we're going to follow Rava. Let's not forget, Rava is the real Basroi. He's the last one. Rava Omar af mitakonas Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai ve'elach like Rav and Shmuel Beitzah asura. Why? But listen to Rava's rationale. Miloi moide Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai that she'im bo'u edim and amincha ulamayla. If edim do come, even after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, after mincha, shenei hagin oisa hayoim kadosh ulamachar kodesh. Bomba. This is mamish a new thing right now. Look inside Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. Zokt Rashi afal gav the tikei lekabel edus hachodesh kol hayoim. Today is Yom Aleph. Today is Yom Aleph. Says Rava Gavaldik. But he didn't completely change from the way things were while the temple was standing. You know what he left intact? That tomorrow Yom Beis is Rosh Hashanah. Now we get the origins of our calendar right now. Avol milasas Yom Tov Sheni loy nekra takana d'shonim imekayma. Wow, that's kind of like this. When the Beis Hamikdash was standing, one day Rosh Hashanah, this one day Aleph is holy. There was one case. What was the one case? If the Edom came after Mincha, meaning after the Talmud Shalbein was brought, that day remained holy. Lamed, the next day was Yom Aleph. That was the original Yom Arich. Comes along Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai and he says, we receive the Edom until the end of the day. And when they come, that day is Aleph. But Rav is saying, yes. But Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai never said that tomorrow should not be Yom Tov. What he did say, he made a change with Nimnu, that it's no longer Lamed. The Edom can come until Shkia. It's going to become Aleph. But there's going to be 2 days Yom Tov. Because once they initiated the concept of a Yom Arichta, Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai never removed that. He made a huge change. Instead of today being Lamed, today is Aleph. It affects everything. It affects when Yom Kippur is. It affects when it affects the calendar dates. But the concept of Rosh Hashanah having 2 days did not change. And we viewed those 2 days as...
Did we not know this before? When Rabbi Yosef was giving his explanation, did you know that it was Aleph and Beis?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It was he made a change, but he didn't take away 2 days Yom Tov. So it remained the Yom Arichta. And let's read inside the end. Amar Rava, And we quoted that on Daf. We quoted that on Daf Daladam and base on the top. That Hilchas Hakavos in the Rav Bahana class. Because making a recap, first Machlokes was Shabbos Yom Tov or Yom Tov Shabbos. There Rav was the Machmir. Remember, Rabbi Yechanan was the Makel. And normally Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yechanan, not over here because of Rava. We follow Rava. Second case was 2 days of Goliath. Egg is laid on one. Rav was the Makel. You can have it on the other. Ravasi, because of a suffix, was Machmir. And now the final case, Rav and Shmuel, Rosh Hashanah, egg is laid on one, it's usher on the other, even after Takanas Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, Hilchas Hakavasi Derav, Bahanat Las, Bein Lekula, Bein Lechumra. It's amazing how one egg, Chevra, we have a few daf of Gemaras, it's Freilach, and we are just getting started, to be continued. So guys, we're going to continue. I guess it takes us slichas without rushing. Let's aim to start slichas at 6:35. We always did it that way. We have a few minute leeway. So if it's taking us an hour, then we'll start to learn at 5:35 until out of Rosh Hashanah. And yeah, we're gonna, God willing, we're gonna learn in Sola. The internet should be working well. So Monday morning, 5:35 in Sola will be there already, and 6:35 slichas, 7 o'clock will be shachos.
Rabbi, so can you recap today?
Yes.
We keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael because of the takana of ever since, even with Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, he established it as the first and the second.
That's right. He never took away 2 days Yom Tov. He just changed what numbers the day should have.
It used to be 30 and 1, and then it became 1 and 2.
That's right. And don't forget another detail, that when the Beis HaMikdash stood, at least the way Gemara Rashi, the way I understand over here, it's not that there was always 2 days. If the Eidim would come early in the morning, Shalom Al Yisrael, that will be Yom Aleph, and that's that. But many times there were 2 days. If the Eidim Bechlal didn't come, then for sure you have 2 days. Because you have to begin with maybe today's Rosh Hashanah.
So 1 second, they would blow shofar, do all the things you're supposed to do like Rosh Hashanah, but if it's not Rosh Hashanah, you got to put on tefillin, you got to do like all the...
That's the issue with tefillin, Shev al Taisa, that's the big issue with tefillin, correct? No, I mentioned this before already, that being machmer, but you're being makel for tefillin. But you're not doing it, you don't have an option.
Rabbi?
Yes.
From everything we're learning, I'm understanding that the 2 days Rosh Hashanah has to do with the suffix also, but I don't think that's correct, no?
Even though everything began with a doubt, but there was an enactment, there was a takana, there was a choik. The Chachamim said that in certain scenarios, you have to keep 48 hours. Once they made that statement, we view both days as one long day. 2 days Golus, Rav says there was never such an enactment by the sages. They never said that we kept 2 days because we did not know. On Rosh Hashanah, they said, in other words, when Eidim came after Mincha, the Chachamim said, listen, what's going to happen? Today has to be Yom Tov, even though you don't accept the witnesses, even though tomorrow is going to be Aleph, today finish Yom Tov. Once they made that decree, they basically told you that God said 1 day, and they're saying 2 days. How can that be? They're making 2 days into 1 day. They're making 1 day into 2 days.
Thank you.
Well,